And now it's time for The Catch, which takes you around the Great Lakes to hear from reporters about the issues they're covering.
Michigan Radio's Brianna Rice has some good news about Great Lakes piping plovers.
These birds have been on the endangered list since the 1980s, when they were having as little as 12 to 17 pairs of breeding parents. And then, we're not really sure how many babies come from that because sometimes they don't all make it.
Chicks become fledglings if they live longer than 23 days and can fly.
They have to face a lot of obstacles, humans, dogs. As more people move along the Michigan Lake shoreline, there are raccoons and other animals coming with them. So in addition to just, elements coming in.
But in 2022, there were 150 fledglings born to 72 breeding pairs. That's the biggest brood of fledglings since Great Lakes piping plovers were listed as federally endangered in 1986. Brianna says researchers and conservationists have played a big role in the comeback.
They're trying to get back to at least 150 breeding pairs, but the real hope is to get back to the heyday of 200, 300 breeding pairs and parents.
Of the Great Lakes region's 72 breeding pairs, 48 were in Michigan, and Michigan's nests produced a record number of chicks. Sleeping Bear Dunes National Lakeshore alone had 31 plover nests and produced 66 fledglings, almost half of the fledglings from the entire region.
This year, we had so many babies because the water levels were a lot lower, and the piping plovers like to lay their eggs on the shoreline. So when the water gets high, they can't lay their babies there.
Brianna says researchers and others are hopeful this year's plover count is a step in the right direction.
It's definitely a sign that the population might be stabilizing. So right now, it's unclear if they will ever be able to do this on their own, but they've got researchers watching them. People are looking for them every year. People are counting them. So they have a lot of support, and that support does not seem to be wanting to change anytime soon.
In Duluth, Minnesota Public Radio's Dan Crocker has been looking into a growing sector of Great Lakes tourism.
This past summer was a record-setting year for cruise ships in the Great Lakes, and that's meant a lot more tourists coming to the region, and it's also meant economic development for cities in the region like Duluth, Minnesota, where I'm based.
While the cruise industry isn't new to the Great Lakes, it's been modest up until this year. Estimates indicate nearly 20,000 people will cruise the Great Lakes this year on more than 100 cruises.
A big change this year that's helping to drive the growth is that a new player came into the Great Lakes, Viking, which is a really big name global brand in the cruise industry. Viking made a commitment to the Great Lakes. They have a specific ship called the Octantis that they built. And that's a big deal, experts tell me, because when a player like Viking comes into the market, that means that other large cruise companies could also be looking to follow suit.
And while more cruises are a big deal, the cruise ships themselves are small, or at least smaller than the massive ocean liners many people equate with cruises.
Great Lakes ships are much smaller, and that is because they have to be smaller because they have to fit through the locks in the St. Lawrence Seaway. So these ships hold, on average, about 200 people. The Viking ship I mentioned holds nearly 400 people. So they're a lot smaller, and that actually is a big part of the appeal.
The cruises offer passengers a chance for bi-national sightseeing, with stops in small resort towns and larger cities in the Great Lakes region.
They all go to cities both on the American side and the Canadian side of the border.
Investment in new customs facilities in Cleveland and Duluth is another factor adding to the recent growth in the cruise industry.
These are permanent sites, and that's a big deal for these cruise companies because in the past, they often had to work individually with customs to set up sort of these temporary facilities to have their passengers go through customs.
Dan says many cities in the region, including Duluth, are betting on economic growth from the cruise industry itself and the influx of visitors aboard these ships.
I know Milwaukee, Wisconsin, for instance, has really invested in having their city be a place where cruise ships can depart from and also end their trips on. And that's sort of the next step up for cities, is when they can have cruises beginning or ending at their cities. Then that really brings folks in before their trips or after their trips and can really increase the spending. So there are different levels of economic benefit that these cruise ships can bring. And another thing I should point out is that the ships also themselves spend money in these communities. They have to buy fuel, they have crew members coming and going, so there's also economic development that way.
In Madison, Wisconsin Public Radio reporter Sarah Lear has a story about the discovery of an ancient Great Lakes artifact.
A team of archaeologists and divers pulled a 3,000-year-old canoe out of Lake Mendota in Madison.
It's believed to be the oldest canoe ever discovered in the Great Lakes region, and the second to be found in Lake Mendota. Both were spotted by maritime archaeologist and scuba diver Tamara Thompson.
She saw a piece of wood sticking out with kind of a curved end, and I think to you or me, it wouldn't look like anything special. It would be like, okay, this is just a piece of driftwood, but her being very skilled at spotting these kinds of things, she felt that it was something more and basically was like, wow, this is another dugout canoe.
The first canoe was raised from Lake Mendota last year and is thought to be around 1,200 years old. Researchers believe both boats were made by ancestors of the Ho-Chunk Nation. The canoe that was just raised this year was probably made by hollowing out a single piece of white oak.
Archaeologists believe it was mostly buried under the lake bed for the last 3 millennia. They did radiocarbon dating on a piece of it and discovered that it dates back to the year 1000 BC.
The age of the canoe is part of the reason it took months of planning before archaeologists and divers could safely remove it from the water.
It's very waterlogged. The archaeologist who first discovered the canoe actually said it now has the consistency of wet cardboard. So they had to be very, very delicate with it when they pulled it out of the lake. They actually pulled it out in pieces, so they didn't manage to keep it totally intact, but as part of the preservation process, they're expecting that they'll be able to put it back together.
Sarah says the next stop for the canoe is the State Archive Preservation Facility in Madison, where it will undergo a 2-year-long preservation process.
It will be preserved, and then it will be freeze-dried, and then it can be displayed in a museum.
In the meantime, researchers with the Wisconsin Historical Society and the Ho-Chunk Nation are already working on plans for a comprehensive search of Lake Mendota to see what other relics might be hiding there.
There are a lot of depths that still need to be explored, which I think kind of raises interesting questions about what history is there for us to discover and what more can we learn.
At Great Lakes Now, we aim to cover the Great Lakes region and the people who live here, like you. Please follow us on social media, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and sign up for our newsletter at greatlakesnow.org.